Hi, I'm Naomi Hall, and I want to welcome you to Stress Management for Educators, our virtual summit. And my whole goal with this summit is to provide powerful steps for you to reduce your stress so you can increase your quality time for yourself and for your family. So today I have with me Michelle Babb, who is a registered dietitian, and she has a private practice in West Seattle where she specializes in mind body nutrition, weight management, and inflammatory digestive disorders. So she is a bachelor trained functional medicine practitioner and was a clinical nutritionist at the Functional Medicine Research Center. She's written several books. The title that stands out to me the most, there are two that you've written: Anti-Inflammatory Eating for a Happy, Healthy Brain, and The Imperfect Perfectionist. I just connect so much with those. So welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. And this, I know for some people can seem like a little bit off topic where we're talking about stress in this summit, but I know that food is one of the most important foundational pieces when we're dealing with stress. So I'm so glad that you're here to talk with us about this. So, how does our diet influence our exposure and reaction to stress?
In so many ways, I think it's kind of constantly underestimated how big of an impact your diet can have on your stress response and how you're handling your stressors. So a lot of times we're kind of limited on the exposure to stress because it's in our environment, it's just part of our daily lives, but the way that we internalize that and process that can be greatly influenced by the nutrients that we have in our diet. And so we hear a lot of things about maybe the kinds of foods that we should be minimizing, so not eating as much sugar and processed foods and caffeine and the things that can really kind of amp you up in a way that might not be productive when you're already feeling stressed or anxious. But what doesn't get talked about as much is what you want to put more of in your diet. And so this is a great example of these just colorful, beautiful, largely plant-based, but not entirely,
Mhm.
foods that really help provide the nutrients that you need to help feed the neurotransmitters in your brain, and that can help kind of give you a more kind of calm and level response to the stress that you're exposed to.
Wow, that's great. And I love that just looks delicious to me. Like all of those great foods. So
Beautiful props.
yeah. So are there specific foods that help or hinder our stress response?
Yeah, I love to, like I said, focus on the things that we want to add more of. So, what we know about the neurotransmitters in our brain is that those actually get fed by certain foods. So, we hear about things just as an example. We know that turkey is a source of tryptophan, right? So, we've known that for years. But there's also other foods that are important for serotonin and dopamine. So, that gives us that kind of that feeling of happiness and well-being. And then a really important neurotransmitter, which is GABA. And GABA is something that helps us feel calm and level. And so some of the foods that I have featured here are really helpful in us helping us produce that neurotransmitter. And sometimes it's by virtue of cofactors or other vitamins or minerals that are essential for that neurotransmitter. And sometimes it's just that it helps initiate that neurotransmitter response in general. So, example would be a couple different kinds of kale here. I've got some avocados, some walnuts. I don't have it featured, but salmon, if you're a fish eater, is also really good for GABA. And then an overlay of some of the same foods, broccoli, avocados, specifically good for the dopamine and serotonin response. So that's really important. And then also just the way that the food that we eat influences the microbiome in our gut, which is
Mhm.
also part of this two-way information highway with the gut-brain connection. And so keeping our gut flora, that microbial environment in our gut, really healthy and happy with the foods we eat, also influences our brain and how we deal with our stress responses.
Wow, that's really interesting. I like that you have the perspective of not just what to remove, but
Mhm.
what we need to add in. I think sometimes it's much easier to add sometimes.
It is. And I think, sometimes trying to figure out what to eat and what not to eat becomes a source of stress. So we don't want
Mhm.
that to happen. There's already so much noise and confusion in the world of nutrition and diet, and we live in a dieting culture. So, there's all kinds of messages that seem like they contradict one another and get really confusing, and people get a little paralyzed in making those decisions. But if we just think simply about eating more color, more variety, and some of these lovely foods that are just straight from nature, that really takes a lot of the guesswork out of the equation.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, what about, because I know this can be a big question for people, especially teachers, what about timing of eating?
Yes, timing of eating. So there's lots of different research now around things like intermittent fasting. You've probably heard of, and again, I think this is one of those things that we don't want to get too carried away in the structure of this, but we do need to think about how it works in the context of your day. And I work with a lot of teachers who are faced with the challenge of you're busy with your students all day,
Mhm.
breaks and lunch, unfortunately very condensed and short. Makes me very sad every time I hear that. So not a lot of time to nourish yourselves, unfortunately. So I think it's really important I'm a big proponent of starting the day off with a really nourishing, balanced breakfast. And if you're a person who doesn't, especially with teachers, because what I find is that, sometimes they otherwise wouldn't get an opportunity to eat until much later in the day.
Mhm.
And then it's hard to make really good decisions about what you want to eat, and you're eating quickly and it's hard to self regulate. So while not everyone appreciates breakfast or even wakes up hungry, I think thinking about the impact of whether you eat or skip breakfast and how that flows into the rest of your day is important. So something to nourish yourself in the morning, something that kind of breaks that fast and moves you into the day, I think is important. And then also, generally speaking, trying to not go more than 3 to 4 hours without eating something can be helpful. Otherwise, you can get yourself in a more hypoglycemic state. And that kind of masks some of the symptoms of anxiety. It kind of heightens your stress response.
Mhm.
So you want to avoid that by keeping yourself just more level and balanced through the day. And then as it relates to intermittent fasting, my thought on that is it doesn't have to be, it started out with it must be 16 hours of fasting, and then people would have too short of a feeding window and they'd get stressed out about that.
Mhm.
I think the most important thing is that if you're eating in alignment with the circadian rhythm of your body, which kind of maps with the sunrise and sunset, then you would want to have more of your nourishment happening at the front part of your day, so breakfast and lunch and maybe an afternoon, and then funnel down to a little bit less or not as large of a meal perhaps in the evening, and less of the evening snacking. So if you just sort of have a cutoff time in the evening and then you go to bed and rest and have a little bit of a nice resting fasting period for your digestion and for your brain, that can lead to more productivity the next day.
That makes intermittent fasting sound so much more approachable.
Right? Yeah, because a lot of times, especially if you're a person who does wake up hungry and you really want to have breakfast, and you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, I'm supposed to wait till noon or 1," or that's for some people not practical. And then the other thing is that we like to have our family dinners, and that's really important for many of us. So, being able to do that, and with kids and sports and all the other things, you often, you don't have the benefit of being able to stop eating at 5 p.m. That might not be realistic for some people. So, just having even a 12-hour fasting period is probably, adequate for most. So
Okay, that makes so
wherever you
much
can
more
fit
sense. Yeah,
yeah,
I love that. So one of your books is Masterful or Mastering Mindful Eating. So what is mindful eating and why is that important?
yeah. So mindful eating, we spend so much time talking about what to eat, and that is very important. But we don't spend any time talking about how to eat, which might sound a little silly, but the truth is that especially in the American culture, we are multitaskers. We get praise for doing many things at one time, and that includes eating and working. And so, if you're a person who tends to be on a device, on the computer, kind of eating, or driving down the road and putting food in your mouth, at the same time as you're flying down the highway, then what's happening is your body is reading that as you being in that fight or flight response mode. So that means that you don't produce as many of your digestive enzymes, and you don't have as good of motility in your gut, and you don't have a good way to self-regulate because your brain doesn't even have a chance to kind of catch up with what you're doing with your eating.
Mhm.
So mindful eating is about engaging and being present with the food with limited distractions if possible, and really engaging your senses in that kind of sacred act of eating. So it helps to improve your digestive response and how you assimilate your nutrients when you eat, and then it also helps with satisfaction and self-regulation. So while it's probably not practical to think that you can sit down with a placemat and a candle for every meal. We can pull little elements of mindful eating into our day in different ways, and be able to just kind of slow that train down and help your body out significantly.
That like you just are making things make so much sense, like the intermittent fasting, the mindful eating, and how. And I'm like, have you like been in the car with me? Like, and I know so many of our teachers can relate to this of like, I'm eating while I'm passing out papers or grading papers or while I'm driving the car because I'm rushing from here to there. Um, so yeah, that I personally have been trying to take just think about what I'm eating, taste it, chew it, because like when you're a teacher, like you just eat, like just to get something in you.
Right. And part of that is survival, and there will be times where that is just necessary, and it's important just to get that food in your body. But if you can just kind of engage with this in small ways. So if you're driving down the street, just as you're doing, anyway, it's just like let's say you're eating some cashews and you just put the cashew in your mouth and you just kind of think about, I have cashew in my mouth. What does that taste like? How does that feel in my mouth? Can I kind of extend, that period of chewing and just kind of notice what's going on? Can you do a little bit more of that? And even that will make a difference.
Wow. And it's just simple things. I love this. So what advice do you have for teachers? Because our teacher schedule is pretty rigid. Everything is set for you. And like you said, lunchtime is a tiny amount of time that you've got to like get the kids to lunch, go to the bathroom, grab your copies, eat your lunch, all those things.
Yeah.
So what do you recommend for teachers who kind of struggle with finding time for mindful eating?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to be realistic and look at your schedule, your day-to-day schedule. Sometimes I have, my teachers just evaluate your schedule the night before and kind of think about what's this going to look like. We plan lots of things that we plug into our day, but we don't have to think about when will I take time to nourish myself and what do I need to do in terms of prep work to make that happen. So
Mhm.
if it means that you're better off packing a lunch and that you want to make sure that there's also an afternoon snack, or maybe need a mid-morning snack, but you think about your day and how that's laid out, and then think about what you need to do behind the scenes, to make sure that you have an abundance of these kinds of foods, and variety is really key. So having things that, this is a great example. I have broccoli here that I just quickly broke into florets and washed it. So now when I open my refrigerator, that broccoli is ready for me to use it at any moment. And later on, I'll strip the kale and chop that and keep that in a salad spinner. So that is something that I can just put into a bowl. I can, pre-cook grains and make grain bowls really easily. I can assemble that in 5 minutes if I have all the stuff prepped. So making sure that you're doing a little bit of planning so you set yourself up for success. And then the other part of that is just take shortcuts without apologies. This is a time in your life where you just need to be able to buy some foods that are already cut up for you. Buy the bag of florets that are already chopped, have some frozen veg so that when you get home from a long day, you can just put that in a steamer or microwave it or whatever you need to do. So you get some veggies as part of the meal, but you're not having to do a bunch of prep work. So it's okay to take those kinds of shortcuts and let somebody else do the work for you when that makes sense.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I'm a big fan of the frozen vegetables because
Yeah.
that just makes it so easy for me. Like you said, like you just pull it out of the freezer, pop it wherever you need to, and you've got veggies. Because yeah, I don't have
Right.
time for like, well, confession time. I don't know how many times veggies have sat in the crisper drawer
Right. Right.
beyond usefulness.
Yes, they just don't come out alive. And I really am a believer that if you can do any amount of basic prep to make it so that all you really have to do is pull it out and cook it, or put it in a salad, then you're really much more likely. That reduces the waste so much. So that's
Mhm.
important too, but the most important part is it actually makes its way into your body, so it gets to do all the good work.
Yep. Oh, that's fantastic. So, what's the single most important takeaway for our educators who are watching today who are trying to make diet and lifestyle changes? to help them optimize their stress response? Like what can they walk away with today?
The most important thing is to try to not overcomplicate this, so we just talked about, think about how this fits into the context of your life and your own schedule. And if you think one thing about the types of foods you would eat, I would say think about color and variety and foods that are minimally processed. If you can start moving in that direction with any of the foods that you're eating, that's going to have a huge impact. So, keep it as simple as that and try to think about it from the what do I want to add into my diet that really helps me thrive versus what am I not supposed to eat? What can't I eat? What are they saying this week is the terrible food?
Mhm.
So keeping it simple and trying to stay on that kind of positive vein of, we have a wide variety of foods that are so just fundamentally nourishing and can really help reduce that stress response, keep you feeling more kind of level with your moods, and help with clear thinking and focus. And those, a lot of the foods are right in front of me right now. So just don't overthink it, and try to turn down the all of the nutrition noise that's coming from social media and everywhere else,
Mhm.
and stick with the basics.
You make it sound so easy. I love it. Like you have a very practical approach to this.
Good.
That's and that's what teachers need. Like
Yes.
the audience needs the like it's simple, I can do it and go. So I love that. So you have a free gift for our audience. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So as I was talking about that stress response that, we sometimes, if we're eating while we're on the go, I have a really nice diagram that kind of shows what happens when the body is stressed when you're eating, and when you're in what's called the parasympathetic mode, which is rest and digest. And so I think that is always really enlightening to people, and it helps with that when you're faced with this multitasking habit. It's helpful to sort of understand the physiology and what's going on. And so that, I think, resonates with a lot of people. So that will be something that you'll be able to link to, that will be featured on my website.
Fantastic. So yeah, we will give you a link for that. And then I just have three questions that I didn't tell you about that are just fun questions to end with.
Good.
So what are you watching? What are you reading? And what are you listening to?
Oh, that's such a good one. Um, I kind of go in and out. And this probably won't surprise people that I'm, very much a food nerd, and I'm in the world of, the culinary world. So, I often will gravitate toward things like Chef's Table, which is where the beauty of the food is really showcased. Because I think as we're thinking about mindful eating and engaging our senses, and I'm a very visual person, I love to think about the color and the beauty of food. And so that to me really kind of floats my boat in terms of what I watch. And then what I'm listening to, is that another one of them?
Yeah.
I do have some podcasts that I are kind of my go-tos, and Mind Body Green is one of them that I really enjoy. There's a lot of really great guests who are featured, who will talk about nutrition and what's really in the science and what we're seeing, and help sort through some of the misinformation that's out there. So I really appreciate that, and they cover a variety of different topics. So that's what I've been listening a lot to. And then what was
Reading.
oh, and what am I reading? So I actually have been reading. So I just kind of got through braiding sweetgrass, which and I'll mention this because this is a genre that I think is really nice. Is that it has to do with a lot with reconnecting with nature and really appreciating the abundance of what the earth and what the environment provides for us, and understanding that we're not separate from that. And I think that's really important with food and eating, but just in general, one important way to reduce your stress response is to just go outside and be in nature. So I'll often tell people, when you're working on mindful eating, if you can go outside in an outdoor space and enjoy your meal and your food outside, you're already really immediately reducing that stress response. So that's one of the books that sort of for me really resonates in that way too.
Oh, those are great. I love that. This is part part of my asking these questions is selfish of like I like to know what people are reading and listening to and watching so that I get ideas of other great things to, read and watch and listen to. So those are fantastic. I'm gonna have to look for that book. That sounds great. So thank you for joining us, Michelle. I really appreciate you coming and giving us such practical steps that we can take with nutrition for managing our stress.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate being able to do this specifically for educators because I can't think of a more important job. And, so I just feel really honored to be a part of it. Thank you.
This was great. And audience, we want to thank you for joining us. Um, Click the link for Michelle's freebie and go to her website. Check out her books. As you saw, she has really practical advice for you when it comes to nutrition and just kind of that ground level. Here's where you can start rather than like all the big ideas, but those are behind what she's telling you. And join us for the rest of our interviews. Again, lots of great experts like Michelle covering different aspects of stress management. Because when you're stressed, you really struggle to find the quality time for yourself and your family. And that's what I want you to be able to find through the steps that these experts are giving you. So thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.